How many of you remember when you were 5 or 6 years old and it was really funny to talk about poop? That's what we're going to do tonight for the next 2 hours. We're going to talk about poop. We're going to talk about the proposed Waitsfield Community Wastewater Project. Appreciate all you guys coming out. There's more folks online. We are going to do this with Tony and Chris's help. A couple of quick public service announcements. We have a table over there that has a sign-in sheet. That would be awesome if you guys could sign in. We have a super quick survey that will take you less than a minute to fill out and give us some useful information. We hope you will do that. We also have a public support letter for this project. If you already support it, please sign it. If what you hear tonight makes you want to support it, please sign it. If you think about it afterwards, I think it'll be available online. Please sign it. There's a QR code, I think, on both the support letter that you can sign it. Click on that, have it on your phone, sign it later. But again, that will give us really helpful information that will lead up to the bond vote on June 11th, which we'll talk more about later. A couple of intros. Myself, I'm Chuck Curtis. I'm on the select board. Lived in the Valley for the last 30 years. A couple of kids at Waitsfield Elementary School, and have been for the last 2.5 years working on the wastewater project team, along with Annie Decker-Della-Sola, former town administrator, now wastewater project manager. We also have John Ashley from Boyd King, who's an engineer that's been working with us hand in hand over the last couple of years. We've got Misty Sensigali from USDA Rural Development, who is hopefully going to provide some funding for this job. Not in hand yet, but working on it. Glad you're here. We have Fred Messer from the Select Board. We have Christine Sullivan, Chair of the Select Board. We have Brian Shoup, I think, online, also from the Select Board. And Sam from Advert Valley Planning District, who's been a big help on this project as well. There is some food in the back. Food on this. Larissa, sorry, Larissa. Larissa Erskine, also on the Select Board, our newest member. Sorry about that. There's food and drink in the back. Delicious empanadas from Paprika and Waterbury. Please help yourself to those. What we're going to do here is give a quick overview of the project. That'll probably take half an hour. Bunch of slides, some visuals we'll look at over there, and then open it up for questions and answers. We want to leave a lot of time for that. We do ask that you hold questions till after the presentation, just to keep things flowing. Did you miss anything? All right, cool. Look at a few slides.
Should we start with our video?
The video. We have a video. Yes. We're going to start with what?
Larissa,
Yes.
try to use that mic. His mic's kind of cut now.
You got it. Yeah, so we are going to kick things off actually with the premiere of our new video, about a 5-minute informational video about the wastewater project. For those joining us on Zoom, I'm going to send you a link to the video on YouTube. You're welcome to watch it now or later. Sharing the screen and playing the video we found earlier, it's a little clunky, it lags a little bit, so you guys will have 5 minutes of watching us watch this video, but please enjoy watching the link now or later. Yes.
The Waitsfield Community Wastewater Project is potentially the most transformational project that we could ever do in this community.
Waitsfield is the largest town with about 1,000 municipal wastewater system.
It's progress, okay? It's infrastructure progress. You need that.
When you look at our school and you look at green space, most of the green space is our leach field. And you can't drive over that, you can't build on that.
three parts to it. One is collection from individual homes and businesses. The second is conveyance to get that waste wherever you want it to go. And the third is treatment. And it's going to run south along Route 100 all the way down to the Munn Field. So it's a great site. It has the advantage that the town owns it. That turns out to be a really critical element of the project. Many other towns are also looking to put in wastewater, are buying for the same grant funding we are, but they don't own the land. And that has become a stumbling block. Priority users would be those users who have septic systems that are in the river corridor, in the floodplain, are older than 40 years old, so likely to fail soon. They've outlived their useful life. 70% of the capacity of the wastewater system as currently proposed would serve those priority users. They don't have to sign up, but and the vast majority, over 90%, have said, yeah, you build it, we'll sign up.
Septic systems have a lifespan. They have a shelf life, if you will. They're all going. A lot of them are between 20 and 40 years old around here.
That river is at risk, in my view.
It's really the next step in line with our own organizational sort of mission and history. It's recognizing that these older systems, do pose a risk to human health and sort of the overall health of the river.
I think both the business community and residents here are thrilled to see this project happening because so many of them are failing, so many of them are old, that they're going to be able to not have to put investments into a new system.
The cost of putting these systems can run from $10,000 to $50,000, A, and B, there's not always the land to support them.
Our employees have a lot of challenges finding housing here in the valley that they can afford, or even housing that's available to rent or to buy. Many of our employees live in the towns outside of the valley because that was the only place they could either find or afford in order to work here in Waitsfield.
I've been thinking of either developing myself or having a developer develop my property into affordable housing. If that piece of property is to be developed into workforce housing, then the wastewater infrastructure it can't be done without it.
We want our growth to be centered. We don't want to lose our landscapes here in the valley. We want our development to be here in the villages. And it's super important that we put the infrastructure in so that we're able to make that happen.
There are parts of the school building that were built before there was a man on the moon. That's the central part of the school. And then there have been various additions. So we actually have 2 septic systems. We have 2 leach fields. But if we had to make any additions, we would be in trouble because there is no space for us to build on without impinging upon those where our wastewater system is.
The vote on June 11th is to authorize the town to proceed with sourcing the funds to get this built. Those funds aren't committed yet. We don't have all those funds locked in. If we're unable to get enough of the grant funds and low interest rate loans to fund the project, we won't be able to move forward at this time because it won't be affordable to the taxpayers and it won't be affordable to the users. This is a really important initiative that will impact the town for decades to come. So really important that we get as much turnout and hear from the public, good or bad, on June 11th.
You guys are gonna be sick of me by the end of this. That was awesome. That consistent with our whole approach to this project. That video was not free, but it was grant funded. Thanks to the Macro Plan District for securing a grant that helped pay for this, pay for the food tonight, etc. That's a recurring theme you're gonna hear from us.
Somebody else paid.
Yeah. Keep that going. Now, I think we're going to hit the slide presentation and then take your questions afterwards. Please. We're going to split this up. I'm going to turn this over to Annie in a second, once we get through just the first slide. Great, awesome. So, quick overview of what we're going to cover tonight. Short and sweet, why are we doing this? What work have we done to date? The project team's been at this for 2.5 years, hard to believe, that's a long time. So we'll give you an update of the work we've done to date with great help from Du Bois & King, the engineering firm. We're going to talk through the proposed system that's come out of that 2.5 years of work. We've looked at 8 different alternatives, have selected one to move forward with. We'll walk you through that. We'll talk about how much is it going to cost, and we'll talk about how we're going to pay for it. And finally, we'll talk about the bond vote scheduled for June 11th, quick timeline, and then a quick wrap up. And then, most importantly, your questions.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you very much.
Tony, should I use the mic? also?
Yeah, you
Okay.
That'd be great.
All right, well, why wastewater? As most of you know, currently all sewage disposal in Irisville and Waitsfield Village is addressed by private septic systems. This piecemeal approach to wastewater management in the highest density portion of town, it poses an environmental and a public health risk. It potentially contaminates the Mad River, the associated wetlands, private wells, and also limits infill development potential in these 2 areas. Public health and environmental risks also increase as systems age. Replacing aged or undersized systems can be extremely expensive, as we know, and that cost falls on private property owners right now. Historic Waitsfield is also the largest village in Vermont without municipal wastewater, and it is the only ski town without centralized wastewater service in Vermont. So a lot of this effort also is in line with the town's kind of core goal of compact rural development. The lack of a central wastewater collection and treatment system continues to hinder the town's efforts to foster this compact settlement pattern, which is envisioned for both Waitsfield Village and Irisville. This impacts sustainable economic development, housing opportunity, again, environmental and public health in the 2 villages, and it ends up putting more development pressure on the lower density areas of town. A number of priorities and policies in the Waitsfield Town Plan, most recently updated and adopted in 2023, supports the exploration and creation of a centralized wastewater system. Those efforts, actions, and priorities are found all throughout the plan in the housing chapter, the economic development chapter, the facilities and services chapter, natural resource chapter, and the land use chapter. And pursuing the community wastewater project is also specifically identified as a priority project for the town over the next 8 years in the kind of opening priority projects portion of the town plan. The community wastewater project also ties into a number of other projects that the town has recently either completed or has in progress. These include the bylaw modernization project. Those updated zoning bylaws were adopted in 2024, focus on the villages and making it easier to proceed with kind of smart growth infill development in the village areas. Irisville also recently received a neighborhood development area designation from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, which unlocks opportunities for both, municipal planning, but also parcel owners in those areas. And the town is currently undergoing the Irisville Master Planning Project, which a lot of you know about as well. So what are the project goals for the Waitsfield Community Wastewater Project? They are to protect the environmental health of the community, specifically the Mad River and the associated streams and wetlands that are currently at risk, to protect public health where septic systems are located close to water wells, to offset the economic hardships of replacing these aged or failing private septic systems throughout our villages, to increase housing options, to support economic activity, and to incentivize compact growth in Waitsfield designated areas. This supports the historic settlement pattern of concentrated villages surrounded by open countryside and forested mountains that, again, is supported by the Waitsfield Town Plan. So now we'll talk a little bit about the project history specific to the Waitsfield Community Wastewater Project. As Chach said, we've been working on this project for 2.5 years now. The planning phase of the project has been completed via funding through the Vermont DEC's Clean Water State Revolving Fund. The town has received subsidies for multiple phases of this project. The town has selected Du Bois and King as the project engineer back in 2021 through a qualification review process. And the two reports that have been produced to date are the feasibility study and the preliminary engineering report. So the feasibility study phase of the project kicked off in fall of 2021 when the Planning Commission and the Water Commission, with support from the Select Board, pursued this state funding to complete this study. And the goal of the study was to study the potential for centralized and decentralized wastewater solutions and expansion in both directions of the town's water supply. This slide shows the original study area map that considered these options from Tremblay Road all the way down to the Munn site along Kingsbury Road. This phase of the project was led by the Water and Wastewater Feasibility Study Committee and culminated in January of 2023. The study area, again, there's a map of the study area right there, that this is the area that we looked at. And Du Bois and King was selected as the project engineer during this phase, and were tasked with evaluating the needs for and feasibility of providing wastewater service and providing wastewater service to parcels in the study area. They also looked at the age and location of existing wastewater systems, environmental constraints within the study area, and soil suitability for existing systems and replacement of those systems, and the impact of existing and new systems on wetlands and important habitats within those areas. They were also tasked with completing a needs analysis based on these facts and developing potential alternatives for wastewater disposal in this study area. The feasibility study also included a review of 8 potential scenarios for proceeding with wastewater disposal. And in December of 2022, the Select Board did take action to move forward with one of those scenarios at the recommendation of the project engineer, which was to explore the development of the town-owned Munn site for treatment and disposal of wastewater. And this leads us into the preliminary engineering report. So the feasibility study was really the foundation for this next phase of the project. The preliminary engineering report, or PER, took place from January 2023 through December of 2023. It evaluated in more detail the potential to provide wastewater treatment at the Munn site, and it included a specific recommendation for a service area, as shown on this map. In February of 2023, the Select Board also approved a plan for continuing work on the wastewater project that included additional support from the Mad River Planning District, who have been a really key partner in this project throughout. And that structure is a structure that we continue to work with today as we proceed with the project. This phase of the wastewater project was also funded via a subsidy from the Vermont Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And the 90% PER was presented to the Select Board in June of 2023 and was finalized and accepted by Vermont DEC in December of 2023. And we will now review the findings of that preliminary engineering report. So the PER found that there are 128 parcels with existing wastewater systems in Irisville and Waitsfield Village. That equates to about 102,506 gallons per day of existing wastewater flows in the villages. And of that entire study area from the feasibility study, 75% of that area of wastewater demand from that area is located in the villages. So this map that includes the 2 villages is the proposed service area for this wastewater system. The PER also found that functioning wastewater disposal is critical to public health and environmental health, that the town's village centers are geographically constrained by the Mad River, its associated floodplain and wetlands, and that the development of a village wastewater system, particularly for manage of wastewater from small village lots, would provide protection for water quality in the Mad River. Additionally, the PER found that 27% of existing leach fields in the villages are found either in the floodplain or in the river corridor. It also found that 26% of existing leach fields are located within existing well shields. Additionally, it found that 43% of systems in villages are near or past their usable life, meaning that they are older than 30 years old. The average lifespan of a septic system is anywhere from 15 to 40 years, but the estimated cost to replace a septic system, especially in areas with poorer soils or environmental constraints, can be as much as $60,000. So the PER ultimately recommended that priority connections be provided for parcels that meet the following criteria, that are either 40 or more, have septic systems or leach fields that are 40 or more years old, are located in a mapped floodplain, are located in the river corridor, or are located within well shields for existing private and public drinking water wells. The PER also recommends that we maintain allocation for connections that would provide for some new housing and commercial development. And kind of break that down into more detail. So the Munn site, as it stands, has about 89,000 gallons per day of capacity for treatment. The wastewater demand of the priority parcels, so those are parcels that are already existing and have established wastewater flows that we would want to get connected to the system, is about 65,000 gallons per day. And then the capacity remaining for new development would be about 24,000 gallons per day. So we're talking about 73% of capacity for this proposed system would go towards serving existing septic systems, and then 27% would be for newer development. To kind of break down what does 24,000 gallons per day really mean? One way to look at that is that would support about 70 new 1 and 2 bedroom homes in these village areas, and would also support an 8 to 10% increase in what we already know to be the existing commercial demand in this area. And where are we now? So at this phase in the project, we are at 30% design. So we have moved past the PER. The select board took action initially in June, had these discussions, and then between working with funding agencies and finalizing an engineering services agreement, officially started work on this next phase of the project to design what a system would look like that serves the 2 villages, focusing on connections for the priority parcels with some additional allocation for new development in the 2 village areas with advanced treatment at the Munn site. So this is where we are right now. Part of this phase of the project does include engagement with potential users of the system and some potential easement holders within the system, and the project team has begun that work. But now I will kick things over to Chach, who will tell you about the proposed wastewater system that is being designed.
Cool, thank you.
So, a lot of numbers there, thank you, Amy.
Yep.
To me, I've been thinking about this for a long time. You guys are seeing a lot of these numbers for the first time, but it's pretty clear from that we have a problem. We have about 100 systems that are either in the floodplain, in the river corridor, over 40 years old, and about to fail if they haven't failed already. That's not good. And they're all densely packed in the villages right next to your water well. That's not a good scenario for our future and really limits development. So 2.5 years later, we got a plan to deal with that. I'm going to take you through what that plan looks like now. It's up on the map there. It's bigger over there on the wall. Some of this looks familiar from earlier slides. The yellow outline that you can see is essentially outlining Irisville and Waitsfield Village, right? That's the service area. That's where homeowners, business owners could connect to this system. The system is going to consist of a pipe from those connecting users from their home or business to a main conveyance pipe that's going to run along Route 100. You can just barely see it maybe, but in purple is Route 100, rounding the bend through Irisville to Fiddler's Green. So all that waste going to flow from homes and businesses into that pipe. There will be 4 storage and pump stations along the way. One near Way House, right next to us here. One kind of at the top of the hill where Waitsfield Village turns over into Irisville. One, what am I missing? Bridge Street. One along Bridge Street, one at the top of the hill, and one by Fiddler's Green. So we got 4 pump stations and storage tanks, and that keeps the waste moving down along Route 100, pipe, all the way to the Munn Field, which is right across from the Valley Animal Hospital, right by Kingsbury Road. That's a 12-acre site that the town acquired in 2000, I think. Perfect site for the advanced treatment system. And we'll talk more about that in a second. Here we go. Advanced treatment system. The project team that's been at this for 2.5 years, we spent a long time with John and the Du Bois and King team with a really serious set of evaluation criteria looking at construction cost, operating cost, energy usage, chemical usage, scalability, ability to meet state water quality standards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we selected at the end of the day, after looking at 3 or 4 other types of systems, was an SBR system. That stands for Sequencing Batch Reactor. Sounds fancy, but it's basically a couple of tanks that are holding waste for generally 4 to 6 hours, running them through an aeration process before moving that waste on to the leach field. That is a gross oversimplification. We have lots more detail in the study and coming up even in this presentation, but that's the highlight. We selected that system because it was deemed the most cost-effective on kind of a life cycle cost analysis basis, which includes the upfront capital cost and the long-term operating cost, so kind of the whole cost of ownership over time. That system, if you actually good to know, one of the other reasons we selected this system was its viability in cold weather climates like we have here in Vermont. There are about 40 of these systems in the New England area. There's over a dozen here in Vermont. One of them happens to be right next door at Sugarbush. That's that photo. That's Sugarbush Wastewater Treatment Plant using the same SBR system from the same vendor that we were talking to. It's slightly smaller. Ours is proposed to be about a 90,000 gallon system. There's a 67 in the same zone. If you hit the next. Quick layout of the system. I'm not sure if you guys will be able to read this, but the system consists of basically waste is going to flow from that pipe we talked about running down Route 100 into this field. There are 2 sequencing batch reactors are right there at the top right. There is, let's see, an underground pump station. There's a waste solids tank that will need to get pumped every 3 to 6 months to take that waste away. That's basically the sludge solids that are left over at the end of this process. And there is a big building that's going to house a lot of the pumps, filters, blowers, chemical feed systems, et cetera, that make this whole thing work. Believe it or not, this is the simplest of the technologies that we looked at, the least energy intensive and the lowest cost, and again, proven to work in Vermont.
What this system will, actually, before we get to this, I want to touch on one thing, and I had to bring cheat sheets because I can't remember all this stuff, but a very valid question has come up. Sal actually raised of, hey, what chemicals are you using in this system, and what health risks do they pose? I would ask the exact same question. There are 4 chemicals that this system uses at various stages in the process. The first is hydrogen sulfide. That's used to prevent odor and corrosion in the pump stations. Those pump stations in town along the pipe and pump station here. That stuff is fertilizer. You can buy it in the garden center. You probably have it in your shed. Use it as fertilizer on your garden. It is non-hazardous, non-toxic, etc. I could eat it and still talk to you today, I think. Carbon. The next one is carbon. That's used to feed this whole thing is a biological process. Carbon is used to kind of accelerate the biological process and keep it going in those sequencing batch reactor tanks. That tank is just like it sounds. It's a big cement tank with some aerators in there that's creating a whole bunch of air bubbles to keep the waste moving. You add carbon to that to kind of keep that biological process to break down the nitrogen. That's what's going on in there. Carbon that's added is essentially charcoal. Again, non-toxic, non-hazardous, made from a renewable source like wood, or woody biomass. So again, biodegradable, not nasty. The next one, the third one, magnesium hydroxide. That sounds like a scary name. Unless you take antacids, it's the same stuff. Milk of magnesia, it's the exact same stuff. Seriously, non-hazardous. It would probably be an irritant if I drank 3 gallons of it instead of taking 2 tabs of it from an antacid tablet. But again, non-hazardous, non-toxic. That stuff is used to control the acidity of the water. Essentially, we're trying to maintain a pH balance in the water to make sure that biological process happens, that solids drop out, etc. So that's first 3, non-toxic, non-hazardous. Guess what? Same thing with the last one. Aluminum chloride, that is salt, similar to road salt that we use on our roads in the winter. I think we use sand here now more than salt. That's a good thing. This stuff, again, it is like, I wouldn't want to eat, a pound of salt, but it probably wouldn't kill me. We use that on our roads around the country. We would use it in this process to basically as a coagulant to attract solids and get them to drop out into the sludge, which ends up in the sludge tank and gets hauled off. It's not going to end up in the leach field. It's not going to end up in the river, and it's non-hazardous even if it does. So that's 4 chemicals. Sorry for the cheat sheet, but I couldn't keep all that straight without it. Now, if we go on to the next slide, we'll get some visuals as to what this thing might look like. The Munn Field, if you haven't been there, is, again, it's 12 acres. About 40% of that is meadow, beautiful meadow right along Route 100. The back 60% is forested and a sloped bank down to the river. So the treatment system would be in the meadow, set back about 600 feet from the river, and it's up about 50 to 55 feet from the river. It is way out of the floodplain. It's out of the 100-year floodplain. It's out of the 500-year floodplain. It's way out of the, that section of river is a straight shot right past there. There's no bends. Water's going to keep moving through there, even in a really intense flood. The 100-year, the structure of that straight river, there's a bank that's about 25 feet high. Then there's a shelf. That's the 100-year floodplain. There are 18-inch trees on that shelf. Clearly, the river hasn't done anything to those trees, which have probably been there over 100 years. Then there's another bank, 30 feet high. Then there's the meadow, pasture land, where this stuff would go. So it's really unlikely that anything from the river is going to come up the hill. That second bank is a huge rock ledge that ain't going anywhere. Literally, I encourage you to go walk down there. It's a 30-foot tall rock ledge that runs for hundreds of feet across that site. So that's not moving. until the next ice age. If you go back a second, this is well, that's actually good ping-ponging around. This is the building. We saw on that last slide 2 tanks and a building, 2 primary big sequencing batch reactor tanks and a building that houses the blowers and the pumps, etc. Those tanks are outdoors. They're partially buried. And this building would be right in front of them, meant to kind of hide the open cement tanks from Route 100. This building, this is a early preliminary schematic design mock-up. We don't know if it's going to look exactly like this, but the theme is, can we make it look like a barn? Can we make it look like it belongs there? And can we hide the big ugly stuff behind it? So that's what's going on here. That building for scale is right now, again, may change as we complete final design, but it's 70 feet long by 55 feet wide. You know, substantial building, but not out of scale with typical farm barns you'd find. Think of LaRoe Farm, the big red barn. That's significantly larger than this structure would be. If you hit the next, I probably jumped ahead, but this is the site. This is Route 100 at the bottom. This is the big open meadow we talked about. This is Kingsbury Road. There is a slight little turnaround here, which gives you a perspective of where that road would be. The building, that barn with the tanks hidden behind, would be set back 250 feet from the road. So it's not like right on the road. It's set back quite a ways. Then you have a very large leach field. One thing I left out, after we go through that sequencing batch process, get all the solids to drop out, control the nutrients, control the nitrogen, control the phosphorus, the water that's left over goes into that leach field. Same as a leach field you'd have in your backyard today, it's just a heck of a lot bigger. Has 89,000 gallons of capacity. That leach field is double the size of what you would need for that to process that volume of effluent. The reason for that, most of the state permitting requirements require you have both a primary field and a backup. In this case, you'd actually run both fields, run one for a year, then let it rest, run the other for a year, let it rest, etc. So we kind of ping pong back and forth. This thing is going to have a useful life probably of over 50 years, given that that sequence of operations. So this thing will function for a very long time to come. We do have replacement costs for both the kind of repair and upkeep of the leach field, for a bunch of that equipment baked into the cost that we'll see in a second. A couple more visuals though first. This is from Route 100 looking across that big beautiful pasture towards the wooded area that drops down sharply to the river. And here's what it would look like with that building in place. Again, it's set back about 250 feet from Route 100. This is looking as you're driving south. The next is, this is kind of from like the corner of Kingsbury Road looking to the north. And again, with the building there. Again, set back from the road, leach field behind it, batch reactors behind it, leach field behind it, and then drop off down to the river. Now, we get to where the rubber meets the road, at least in my world. What's this thing going to cost us? These are preliminary estimates at this point, although a lot of work has gone into those through that whole process of feasibility study, engineering, 30% design, et cetera. So we're getting close on understanding exactly what the system's going to cost us. These costs are broken down by the various components of the system. The total, $15 million. That's a big number. We'll talk about how we're going to pay for that in a second, but right now, just to understand the costs, so you can see most of the costs are in the collection system, that $8.6 million, that's basically the big pipe running all along Route 100. That's about 3 miles of pipe from the elementary school all the way along Route 100 through Irisville down south to the Munn Field, and all the connection points to individual homes and businesses. And it does include the cost to connect individual homes and businesses to the system. So we're not going to say to a homeowner, you should really sign up because we want to get rid of your leach field. that's in the floodplain, but you got to pay up, thousands of dollars to dig a trench to your home and put that on you. We're going to cover that in the project cost. That's a really critical piece. The treatment system, $3.7 million, so like 80% of the total project cost is in both the collection conveyance system and the treatment system. The rest is work we've already done here in the feasibility study and preliminary engineering report, work we've started here in the engineering and final design, construction engineering, and administrative, legal, construction loan financing, et cetera, all that adds up to $15 million. It's a big number. One thing I will continue to stress, that number grant funded to date. So the town has not paid a penny out of our own pockets for that. That has come from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and a little bit in this number from our ARPA funding. The town got over $500,000 of ARPA funding. To date, we've used $28,000, I think, to contribute towards this project. We will be eligible for partial funding for this final design phase, probably 250 grand maybe from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. So a chunk of that and everything to date really already covered through grant funds. So $15 million, scary big $15 million price tag. Flip to the next slide, and we have a preliminary plan on how we pay for it. Missy will yell at me if I don't say none of this money. Well, a couple at the top, that money is in hand, already received. The rest of it from here down, grant, loan, are pending. We have applied for that money. One of the critical steps to receiving that money is the bond vote coming up. But we don't have that money in hand. We've identified sources that would fund 85, almost 90% of the cost of this project. And the other 10 to 15% would be in a low interest rate loan from the U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development Program. If we can pull that together and pay for this whole thing with grants and a small loan, the loan is repaid from users connecting to the system. They would pay a monthly fee, just like you pay your other utility bills. That would mean the taxpayer is not, the town property owners are not funding this thing out of our property taxes. It's coming from grants and users, just like the water system. The water system has been in place, the municipal water system has been in place for 10 years. That was funded similarly with help from USDA, both grants and loans and user fees, so not on the back of the taxpayers. The intent is to do the same thing here. Again, not all this is locked in yet, but there's a plan and there's a will, and we hope there's a way to make that happen. If you hit the next. One of the key steps to make the last 3 or 4 pieces of funding, which are the big ones on that last slide, come to fruition is a positive bond vote from this community. What is the bond vote? Why do we need to do that? The bond vote is to authorize the select board, the Waitsfield Select Board, to proceed with sourcing all these funds. Doesn't mean that we are going to borrow $15 million and make you pay for it. Frankly, that's not a viable project, and that would not have my vote as a select board member. In part because that wouldn't be a usable or affordable project for the users connecting to the system either. If we don't make this thing affordable for connecting users, they're not going to sign up, and therefore the project's not going to work. So it's a delicate balance. We have to get enough funding to make it affordable both to the users and to the taxpayers. And if we can't do that, we put the thing on pause until we can find the money. This design and engineering work that we've done is still going to be of value, not going to change. You know, the site hydrological surveys, that stuff's not going to change. But we may have to put this thing on hold for a little bit until we can source the money and make sure we have an affordable project. What we're asking specifically in the bond vote, the language is a little scary, I got to admit. Let's take the time to read it. We're asking the voters of the town of Waitsfield to authorize us to raise general obligation bonds not to exceed $15,500,000 518, blah, 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 blah. That's a lot of money, and sounds like we're obligating the town to pay, town taxpayers to pay $15 million of debt service. Read on, please, and this is going to be important when we get to the bond vote. Including, but let's see, subject to reduction by state and federal funds, including but not limited to grants and aid. That's all those grants and loans we saw on the other page, right? If we get those, we can do this really affordably. If we don't, we're going to put it on pause. It makes no sense to obligate the town taxpayers and the users to repay $15 million of debt unless we can get those grants. I want to be super clear on that. Hold please. We're almost done. We have like 1 or 2 more slides. So I hope that's clear. I'm sure there'll be questions around that, and we can elaborate further in a sec. If you go to the next. Quick project timeline and schedule just to see when we can get this thing done. One of the key elements of the funding, we had $6 million in there, I think, from ARPA. Those are federal ARPA money that came to the state and has been earmarked for water and wastewater projects across the state. The ARPA money has an expiration date, has to be spent, has to be kind of committed by the end of this year, and has to be spent by the end of 2026. So we are one of the few projects that can actually meet that timeline and get this thing built by the end of 2026. That's why we think we have a really good shot at getting that money. So here's the calendar of how we make that work. Again, we've done all the preliminary engineering work. We have started 30% design. We expect to finish that this summer. Then we move as fast as we can with hopefully additional support, grant support from Clean Water State Revolving Fund. We move right into the final design, basically going from 30% to 90% in final design. That would happen through the balance of the year of 2024 and into the spring of 2025. We would put the first portion of this thing out to bid, which is the treatment system itself. All those tanks and blowers and all, that stuff has a lead time, obviously, to procure. So we would put that out to bid first in, I call it early summer of 2025. Final bid package later in 2025, start construction in fall of 2025, and get this thing built by fall of 2026 and commissioned and online. Aggressive but doable, and this is again what's gotten the attention of the funding groups, saying, yeah, this thing's like as close to shovel ready as we see out there, and we can get it built before the ARPA money goes away. So hopefully that serves us well. I think we have maybe just one more slide. Yes, one more slide. So back to the beginning, big project, expensive project. I think we established the need up front. Why now? Like, you could say, what's the rush? Why do we need to do this now? Hopefully, you heard earlier, like, geez, the environmental, health, and housing needs are real, and they're now. It's not like, we can wait another 5 years to get some more housing. We're not going to have a restaurant left in town unless we get some more housing in this community, in my humble view. So that's why now. We have a unique funding window where all those grants, they're available now, particularly that ARPA piece of $6 million. It's not available later, and later is like we moved the bond vote to June, so we could qualify for that funding, which will be kind of awarded in the August timeframe and formally committed under contract and stuff by the end of the year, because it has to be spent by the end of 2026. So the window is now, and these windows to come up with $15 million of someone else's money to build this, that doesn't happen all the time. We need, in my view, we need to take advantage of the opportunity now. We've gotten all these other parts and pieces of the puzzle together. We have the water system we talked about, that's been operating for years. We just updated our zoning such that we could actually do the infill development in the village that I've been talking about all night and Andy's been talking about. We have a planning project underway for Waitsfield, kind of master planning to figure out some of the wetlands issues in that area. Wastewater is really the last piece of that puzzle. With all those pieces together, we can do the infill development. We can preserve our pastoral landscape outside of the villages. a lot of good things happen. In my view, at the end, there, sustain the health of our environment, our economy, that's the long-term thing. I feel we're at risk, and this is probably me talking as Chach, not so much as select board member, but I feel our local economy is at risk without the infrastructure. The reason I say that, workers, the staff that supports our restaurants, our retail establishments, work in our town offices, et cetera, they can't afford to live here. We've seen a bunch of those businesses close already. If more of them close, we're a less attractive community to tourists that like to visit here. We're a less attractive community for new people to move here. Our school population starts to decline. More of the tax burden falls on us that are still here. That's a terrible scenario that this helps avoid. Put in infrastructure. A person that owns land in Waitsfield Village wants to do an ADU on top of their garage, but can't get the septic permit now because they have no capacity. Now they can connect to municipal wastewater. They know exactly what that's going to cost. There's no mystery of like, oh, I have to apply for a permit and that could take 6 months and I don't know how much it's going to cost or will I even be able to get one. That's a big downer on any future development in our community. And if we remove that barrier, coupled with the zoning, we just changed zoning in the villages from 1 acre to 1/5 of an acre. So if you own an acre lot, add wastewater, don't have your leach field to worry about anymore. Zoning just changed. You have room now to add a second structure, add an ADU, change your current use. It gives us a lot of flexibility, which I think will help ensure the economic viability of our community for generations to come. I have said enough, I'm sure. I will now leave it to you guys to fire away with as many questions as you can think of. Quick reminder, bond vote June 11th, that's going to be here in this building from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at night. We're also going to do mail ballots to every voter and resident in the community. So to make it easy to vote, we're going to have one more informational meeting on June 3rd. That'll be part of our normal select board meeting. It's kind of a public hearing as part of the select board meeting on June 3rd at 6:30. So that'll be another opportunity to ask questions, make sure you understand what we're asking you to vote on June 11th. Thank you. Question time.
You just grab it right out of that folder stuff.
Okay.
Thanks, Erica. Hi, Erica Strom. I yell, so I'll try not to. So I'm so glad, first of all, awesome presentation. I think that I'm super disappointed, and I hope a lot of people are watching. I'm super disappointed that there's not more people here. This is an epic, epic thing for our town, and it is so important because I'll tell you, I've lived in places where they don't give you the choice for it to be paid. They tell you this is what we're doing, and this is what you're going to do, and if you can't do it, bye-bye. So the fact that we're able to gain this money is amazing. So thank you so much for that, and I think it's super important. Just bouncing off your stuff about infrastructure, I think it's hard for me as just an average person to separate the water from the housing and the future plan stuff, because I think the businesses and the existing plots that are here, it's so important to get them this infrastructure, this wastewater system. I'm wondering why we're not going all the way down to places like the Vet, LaRue Farm, the new proposed business, Hadley's. Why is that not able to be included on this? Because that would also include a lot of other businesses that are trying to kick up on that side of town. I don't know, do you want to answer, or do you want me to just yell?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'd love to answer that. It's a good question, and it's really a function of the capacity of the system. So we own the Munn Field, right? That's a huge advantage to get all this funding in a timely manner. But that field has roughly 90,000 gallons of capacity, and the villages alone, currently the wastewater demand or wastewater flows from the villages is already 102,000. So if we looked at the whole area, all the way from Tremblay Road all the way down to the Munn Field, we don't have the capacity to serve all that. In some ways, that's like a natural break on development. There are many that have worried, and frankly, I'm one of them. Like, I don't want to see this place look like Stowe, where all the way from the village to the mountain is, development, 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 all the way around along Route 100 and up the road. So we don't have the wastewater capacity to serve that whole community, and therefore it's unlikely we're going to see that level of development that you might have come from in Park City, like, oh my God, that place is unrecognizable.
Well, when you say that, because what you talked about is it's about 70 new developing homes, 1 to 2 bedrooms. So I guess thinking about that, are those, you talked about, I'm a waitress, I'm 35 years in the business, and I had to actually stop my occupation after COVID because the restaurants don't support us year round. We have an identity crisis, and I love that people go out to dinner, but you're not paying my bills as a normal waitress where I've lived every other place. I can go to Waterbury and make an actual living as that. You can't do that in the Valley, and it's like a cat chasing its tail. Not enough people to work in the business. 60% of Warren doesn't live here. So you talked about, so the 70 people, new homes, that's like maybe, if we're lucky, 140 new cars in town and combusted here. So all of a sudden Stowe is kind of like, oh, 3-way stop at the bridge. Because you're putting, if you put in 70 new homes in downtown and you put 2 cars in each, we're not Misha, we're not Marianne, who bike everywhere and are super supportive of that lifestyle. That's just not the way it is. So I asked that. I know I'm taking up so much time, but I have a lot of things to just question about that. And then, so separating that would be awesome, I think, for us to just get in at least, just push on the part that we need the system, Hurons, all the things. 120, you put out that number, 120 places here in the downtown area that will need that. 12 active Airbnbs exist here in the Valley, so that's 10% of Airbnbs and VRBOs that then we're supporting through our municipal system, which speaks to the fact that we don't have a housing crisis, we have a rental crisis. We have no place for people to live. So if you put in those homes, how does that make sure that those people that live here are able to be the mechanics, able to work? So I know this is a bigger thing, but I think it's all tied in. If you're selling this to the people, which I think is awesome, can we try to separate those kind of things to be able to make it successful for people?
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. It's been part of the town plan, as Annie pointed out, that to try and encourage infill development in the already developed areas, so to stop the sprawl from going, up the valley walls. I think that's super valid. Is that going to lead to more cars in the immediate downtown villages? Yeah, sure. I'd rather see that, frankly, than pave East Road where you and I live. And separately, what was your other, spacing out on the other?
Oh, precisely, like just Airbnbs and rentals.
Yeah,
and
thank you. So, again, my view, I think shared by the rest of the select board and the project team, our job is to create the infrastructure that allows property owners to do what they will within the rules and regulations of zoning with their property. We can't, we have some control over that through the zoning, but it's not our job to build those 70 homes ourselves, right? Our job is to facilitate developers to create housing in the valley. Our job is to protect the public health and safety by removing leach fields that are right next to someone's drinking water well. Our job is to remove leach fields from the floodplain. We're seeing a lot more floods. We know where that stuff's going when that septic system fails and gets washed out into the river. So that's our job. It's not actually to say you can't do an Airbnb and you can't build this and you can't do that. We have a zoning process to control that. I think that's effective. Our job, again, is to provide the infrastructure so that someone that does want to provide and build an ADU apartment rental over their garage knows what it's going to cost, knows that they can access both water and wastewater, knows the zoning and what they can and can't do. So I hope that helps.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sal.
I have a mic for you.
Sal Spinoza. Josh, good job. I appreciate it. I have a number of questions. I think you know that. You've answered some of them. You've addressed them in any event. The first thing that comes to mind is hooking up to this system going to be voluntary? You may have addressed this, and maybe I missed it.
Yeah, our intent is to make it voluntary. We do have limited capacity for the system, right? So honestly, we don't have capacity for every single user in the service area to connect. That's why we focused on priority users. But the intent is to make it voluntary. The intent is to pay for the connection up front.
That was my question. If I could, let me interrupt for a second. The second part of this is those that want to but can't or can't afford it fully, there'll be some financial assistance, I assume.
Well, what I'm talking about
is that what you're talking about?
We're going to have a pipe running along Route 100. You have a building in the village, in the service area, and you want to connect to the system. We're going to dig the trench to your house. We're going to lay the pipe to connect to your existing
So it's an
septic.
in-kind donation, if you will.
Fair
In-kind
enough.
work on behalf of the town.
So that, I think, lowers the cost or barrier to connect. It's not free. Obviously, that's baked into the project cost. And lastly, I know you have more questions, but we have talked to 70% maybe of the priority users in the village areas. Over 90%, like 95% have said, yeah, we'll connect. In part because they know they have an old system. They know that system's going to fail. They know that system's going to cost money to maintain or replace. And they know if we get municipal wastewater, they'll have more flexibility as to what they can do with their property.
So do you foresee a program where financial assistance will be available to those people who want to hook up and maybe can pay for some of whatever that might cost?
I thought I just said this. The goal is no upfront cost to the user, to someone that wants to connect. There would be a user fee for the service, just like you pay for your internet or your utility bill or other utility bills. There'd be a fee.
That's a user fee.
Yeah.
That's use, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I were on the line and wanted to hook up, what kind of, should I be thinking about this costing me anything to hook onto the system?
Not up front, no, but once
Yeah, that's my question, initially.
Initially, no. Once you're connected and you're using the system, you're going to pay a fee based on the amount you use.
Okay.
Got one there, wherever.
Hello, Stephen Gabasto, actually right across from the Mud site. Got a couple of questions. So there's no connection cost. You have a consumption fee ongoing for anybody that we connect, at least your services. Contingency considerations for construction. We all know construction is going to take longer and cost more than it always is estimated at. Has that been planned for? And then the second question related to that are operating costs. Who pays for those and how much are they a year?
Yeah, great questions. So contingency, yes, is included in the budget. John, I think it's a 15% number. So of that $15 million, 15% is contingency. So the project cost is 13 something. We've added 15% contingency to make sure we're covered. I think we've done a good job with a lot of help from outside professionals to factor in things like equipment replacement cost, et cetera. So I think we've been diligent on that front. On the operating cost, that was one of our key criteria to pick a system that was inexpensive to operate, lower energy use, and there are trained operators in the area that know how to operate these systems already. So I mentioned there are 12 other very similar SBR systems in the neighborhood. One of them's at Sugarbush, Plainfield, Northfield, Randolph. There's a bunch of them in Stowe. There's a bunch of them all around here. They're proven to work effectively in cold climates, and there's operators that know how to use them, which means one, lower risk, and two, lower cost.
I think that addresses the resources and capacity, but what are the actual hard ongoing costs per year for the resources? Keep the lights on.
Yeah, it's a good question. So the user fees, I'll get your I might need some help from John, but I'll get your number in a second. The user fees for people that connect would cover both those ongoing and annual operating and maintenance costs, energy costs, et cetera, as well as the debt service, the payments on the loans, the low interest rate loans that we're hoping to get for the job. I think it was in the neighborhood of $400,000 or $500,000 a year, which isn't cheap, but can be covered by the user fees.
So, sorry, number of follow-ups. So, with the user fees, so you have your first 3 years. Are you anticipating?
Put it to your mouth.
Oh. So for the first couple of years, are you anticipating that you'll have full capacity and then consumption, there you go, consumption coming in to actually pay for that $400,000 or $500,000 a year, or will the town have to offset some of those costs?
It's a great question. We've set up the economics, projected economics, I should say, to run at about 70% capacity right off the bat.
Yep.
That's those priority users and a few others, but again, trying to reserve capacity for future development.
Yep.
So we believe we can make the economics work if we get all that grant funding and the low interest rate loans to start at 70% capacity. As we add capacity, that should bring the user fees down, right? Because we're getting more income in, it would lower the cost for each individual user. The water system has worked that same way. That's been around for 10 years. The fees started at over $1,000, I think. $1,000 per year.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're down to, right. I'm not a water user myself, but I think they're down in the $600.
There's scale associated with it.
Yeah. So, and it's been that as more users sign up, more revenue comes in, that gets shared across bigger users, bigger number of users, lower fees.
So would it be safe to say the taxpayers wouldn't be on the hook for any costs after you guys are up and running after a few years? The system would essentially pay for itself through consumption.
That's the intent, and that's the history with the water.
Okay. Follow-on question to that. So if you have the 70% and you're kind of tapped out at that point, what is the incentive to get to full utilization? If that doesn't come, would you expand the service area?
Yeah, everything would be on the table, to be honest. We want to retain capacity for growth, for that infill development we talked about. Realistically, we need to come up with a way to allocate that remaining 30% outside of the priority users. I may give you a permit to do something in the village with the time constraint on it. If you don't use that capacity in 2 years or a year or whatever, yep, we're giving it to someone else. So that would help drive utilization of the system up to that 100% over time. It's not going to happen overnight. We don't expect it to. We haven't planned on it. So I think we have allowance for that in the budget.
Well, when you say in the village, I'm not sure if it's just in general for me, but I'm obviously down by the mud side. If you guys run into capacity and you still have the service area, the pipe is there, would you allow other people to hook up along that to get to that number? Is that on the table?
Honestly, I think initially the priority is going to be in the downtown villages. That's where we have the most public health risk, both environmental and public health risk. So it's like solve that problem first. If there's still additional capacity and new development hasn't sucked all that up, great, we'll look at it at that time, but not in the immediate future.
Yep, makes good sense. Thank you.
Can you just state your name one more time? We have some folks on Zoom who
Yeah,
are wondering.
Stephen Gavasto.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Jeff Brower. 2 questions about the bond vote. 1, who is eligible to vote?
Waitsfield residents, any registered voter.
Okay, but just to clarify, because this could benefit property owners within, commercial property owners inside of this, are they not eligible to vote?
You'd have to be a registered voter. So if you own a business in town, but you live in Facein or Warren or Waterbury, no, you would not be eligible to vote.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then the second piece is, in the language of the bond vote, is there any reason why we wouldn't make it super clear that this will not impact the taxpayers, right? Because that language, to your point, is very scary. And it seems like it should just be super clear to voters, like, this will not increase your taxes.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but there's Vermont statute that tells us exactly what we can and can't say in that language. So we are unfortunately kind of constrained, heavily constrained and locked into that language. One thing we are planning to do as a Waitsfield Select Board is we've already passed a kind of the resolution to move forward with the bond vote, and that specific language required by statute. We are planning to pass a separate resolution prior to the bond vote stating that we intend to fund the majority of that $15 million with grants and low interest rates loans and pay for the loans with the user fees, et cetera, to try and make that really clear and be on the record and upfront with that. One quick follow-up to your question on business owners that don't live in Waitsfield property, aren't registered voters. You did, I don't know if you know not Eric Friedman, Ed Reed, who owns the Garden Center. He was in that video up front. He lives in Facein, he owns a business in Waitsfield, and he's on there talking about, yeah, this would be great for the valley. Not just Waitsfield, but the entire valley. We are the commercial hub, if you will, of the Mad River Valley and beyond. Many of the Facein, Warren, Moortown, et cetera, they all do their shopping here, they all go to dinner here. So there is broad support, I think, among the broader Mad River Valley community. You had a question?
Hi, Brian Fleischer. This has been a long time coming. I hope it goes through.
Thank you.
I have two questions. First one probably a little easier than the second. You had, let's say, 4 or 5 different grants that you're looking for. What happens if you get 3 and don't get 2? And my second question is, what controls do you have, and I haven't kept up with the new zoning, but what controls will you have? Let's say someone wants to build a hotel or a multi-unit Airbnb that's not going to be for local people. What controls will you have to approve or not approve those types of projects with the intention of keeping the housing relatively affordable for locals?
Yeah, great. So in order that you ask those questions on the grant funding first, we are seeking a significant portion of that $15 million from grant funds, something like $13 million from grant funds. I said earlier, if we're unable to get all of them or enough to make the project economically viable to the users without putting too much burden on the taxpayers, then we got to pause and we got to keep trying and go find more funding. There is a process, and Misty Sensigali from USDA Rural Development is here tonight, I hope in support of this project, where her organization is talking to our congressional delegation who has direct spending authority. We've applied for that money, and they're talking to the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation about the ARPA funding. So they're seeing a grassroots effort to make this happen among the community that's gotten farther than probably any other project in the state right now. And they're saying, we want to support this. Let's work together among those 4 different grant agencies to piece this thing together. If one has a little bit less money, maybe the other one can kick in a little bit more, and we've built some of that redundancy in the funding to try and make this happen. But there is no guarantee that's going to happen.
I mean,
without this vote,
Thank you, Freddie. The vote is a critical first step. That literally, without the funding, Misty can't complete her kind of review process where you'd be ineligible at all for that $6 million of ARPA funding. So none of this happens without the vote. With the vote, then we're still vying for that money.
Right. I mean, it's great that you've done all this advanced work, and I appreciate how much has gone into it. But you've mentioned now a couple of times wouldn't put too much of a burden on the town tax system, and yet you're saying there won't be any, burden. The taxpayers won't end up paying for it. So maybe you could clarify that a little bit.
I'd be happy to. Yes. Christine, actually, is our select board chair.
That we prioritize what we think are the most likely sources of funding where we would get, but there are other options out there.
Sure, there's definitely other options out there. So when I've said if we don't get all those and we need more, it's not, in my view, come to the taxpayer and say, hey, can you kick in $3 million? It's go look for other sources of funding. Yeah, clearly, we're not going to do this on the back of the taxpayer. There have been many folks that have raised an issue of, well, how can you say that? Because the town office is going to connect to the wastewater system and pay a user fee. I said, yes, true. If you're really bothered by that, enough to block this whole project that benefits our community and our Mad River Valley, sorry. But that's, to me, is just like any other utility bill that the town office or the school or the fire station or the town garage pays. They pay their water bill, they pay their electric bill. They would pay a wastewater bill as well if they're in the service area and connect. So that's one thing that you could say, yeah, the taxpayers are going to pay for that. But again, we pay for other utilities too.
I understand, TBD. So my second question about how you're going to allocate the 30% additional capacity.
Honestly, that is TBD as well. Very aware of the issues you're raising. Many of those issues you're raising would be controlled by the zoning ordinance, the new zoning ordinance. So that would be the first step. Like, can you build a high-rise hotel in town? Probably not, given the zoning that's in place. If you could, or if you got a zoning permit and you wanted a wastewater permit, we need to come up with an allocation process for that remaining 30%. We haven't done that yet.
You mean the select board?
Select board project team. The project team will make a recommendation based on how other towns have done it around the country. This is not a new issue. Lots of other communities have gotten through this and have a specific water ordinance, have a wastewater ordinance, just like they have a zoning ordinance. So we need to come up with the kind of a governing structure there. We haven't done that yet. Let's first see if we can get these grants and have a viable project first.
When you do, I hope it'll be directed toward affordable housing.
Absolutely, with the caveat that, again, it's not our job, in my humble view, to tell a property owner what they can or can't do on their property. If it meets the zoning criteria and you want to build $1 million house in the village, I would advise against it, but that's your right as a property owner, if you meet the zoning. I would prefer you not do that. And actually,
That's terrifying.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And how many $1 million houses have you seen built in the village? 0. Here's an interesting point that might get us back on track. Sorry if I freaked you out there. If those 70 homes get built, 1 and 2 bedroom homes in the village that we'd have capacity for, if those were built for a cost of $300,000 to $400,000, which is probably on the low end, but let's be conservative, that would add $30 to $40 million to our grand list. That's substantial. That's 7-8% of our grand list.
Can afford that. No mechanic can afford that. So just a bigger question.
Understood, but there's realities of the cost of construction that I don't control, the town doesn't control. We don't know that. I'd love to see them built for $70,000 instead of $300 or $400. Assuming those get built and maybe they get rented at an affordable rate and there is state money available to support that. If those get built, they add to our grand list, is the point I was trying to make. That would be if all those got built at that kind of price range, that would be a 7 to 8% increase in our grand list. That would help spread our taxes around a lot more homeowners and lower our taxes for everybody else. That's a great thing. Not saying it's going to happen overnight, but that would be a benefit.
We could pass a school budget then?
Glad you brought that up too. There is, no, seriously, the timing is frustrating here that we have a, third school budget vote likely to happen the week or 2 weeks before this bond vote. That's not ideal. Let's call it what it is. But these are very separate issues, right? That's a district-wide vote. This is specific to our community. It's long-term infrastructure that we're clearly saying we're not going to put on the back of the taxpayers. So separate issue, and I hope that we avoid, frustration from the school budget vote spilling over into our vote, either low participation or a vote against it. This is long-term infrastructure paid by the users and grants, et cetera, as we've talked about, that benefits our community for decades to come. Sorry.
I've already got a mic.
Oh,
There you go.
great. Hi, Emma Hansen, Irisville resident and Planning Commission member. And I don't have a question so much as I'd like just to take this opportunity to express sincere gratitude to the incredible amount of work that the steering committee has put into this. And just remind everyone that they are volunteers. And actually there's a couple of engineers, but that was not necessarily a qualifying requirement to get on this. Just really dedicated community members. And just walking around Irisville every morning with our dog is just like, now that this is on the table, it is so hard to picture life continuing without this project happening. It is so essential to the vision that we all have for Irisville and Waitsfield moving forward and all of these goals and aspirations that we have. So I mostly just want to say thank you to everyone that has contributed to this project, and also to those of us who did show up tonight, because I also wish there were more of us here, to entreat you all to tell your neighbors what this means and communicate all the points that Josh has done a great job of telling us tonight. And for what it's worth, if this happened, my husband and I would start drawing up plans for an ADU for a affordable long-term resident tomorrow. So, thank you.
Yay.
Is there more that we can do? I just was like.
Hi, Mike Schiavone. I'm the manager at the Village Grocery across the street. First off, thank you for all the work you guys have done. We at the Village Grocery are 100% on board.
Great.
We are one of those properties that is failing in our current septic system, and we are aware of it. My question is, has there been any talk with Green Mountain Power about tying into, hey, we're digging up Route 100, can we bury our power lines? We've lost power in this valley multiple times just in this last year. If we're gonna tear up the road again, is there any thought about presenting that to them at the same time?
I might turn that to John Ashley from Du Bois and King, just whether there's restrictions on what you can put in that trench. I'm guessing mixing power and water may be a challenge.
So it hasn't been something we've discussed. An example of a community that's done that recently is the town of Brandon. When they did the segment 6 project right through the downtown, all the power got buried. They also did every other utility. It wasn't just a wastewater project. They did sidewalks, they did everything. So that's an opportune time. Hasn't been discussed as part of this. The power lines would need to be 10 feet from the sewer. You already have water in the ground and sidewalks on top of the water. So it might be a challenge, but it certainly could be brought up with them to see if, we wouldn't want to at least not have looked at it, I think.
Have the power grids been in the downtown corridor though, or someplace else? I mean, maybe the power lines in town are not the problem.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure where your power grid around here, where you're losing the power normally.
Yeah, I think that's it's a cool idea. And I think we ought to look at it. I am concerned about the timing, right? We had a narrow window to get this thing done before the ARPA money disappears.
That was my follow-up question. It's based on, it may have just been the way it was worded in the presentation. You said the money needs to be spent, the ARPA money needs to be spent by 2026. And there was obviously a talk of contingency for construction. If we start online by October of 2026, like the plan is, if we run through December, does all of that ARPA money go away?
This is pure speculation on my part, but if we're like 80% of the way through this thing and we got everything dug up and we're clearly spending the money as we go. I can't see them saying, sorry, just kidding. But that's purely speculation on my part. Missy, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, that's a very good assumption. Very good.
Yeah,
In my conversations with Vermont DEC, if we do end up being eligible for that state ARPA money, we'd execute a contract with them by the end of this year. And my understanding is we would really identify kind of the beginning of project costs. So we would get that would be the money that would be spent first. So we capitalize on it, yep.
So spend the ARPA money first to make sure we don't run up against that window. Thank you.
Hi. My name's Morgan Sparks. I'm here on behalf of some Facein folks who are deeded into the Mad River Green system. So it wasn't straightforward for us to get water. We never we didn't get water as it was, but I was just curious if there's anything you can tell us about the Facein folks who are affected by this. I think it might just be the 7 of us on Post Office Road, but I don't know.
Specifically, we're gonna put in connection points throughout that long pipe that's running all along Route 100. There will be connection pipes in that area. As I think has happened with water, we have accepted connection from Facein users just across the town line, if you will, to connect into the water. It's conceivable that we would do the same thing here, but honestly, we haven't gotten to that level of granularity yet.
I guess if we're a user, I mean, how would we pay? I mean, there's no mechanism for anything other than a Waitsfield subscriber at this point?
No, I mean, we've, again, Facein users are connecting to the water system and they're paying a monthly user fee just like anybody else. I mean, it's quarterly user fee just like anybody else. But that would be at the discretion of the select board. I think we had to approve each of those individual requests, and it would probably be the same thing here. So I would never say never. We would love to have, the economics are based on participation. So if you're there and you're eager and you're willing, we would certainly take a look at it.
I'll just add in that any of the questions around who can connect and whether anything's mandatory and how those connections could be approved or not are all going to be formed by your select board in a sewage ordinance. So at that time, you'd really have definitive answers. I think whenever Josh has been talking about who's going to connect and who's prioritized and everything, that still all has to be officially codified in your sewage ordinance by the select board, which there's a public process for also. So I just wanted to make sure people understand that part of it.
There would be a specific, basically a connection easement that we would sign with property owners, or property owners would sign with the town if they want to connect. That gives us the right to bring the pipe to your house and gives us the right to maintain that pipe over time. Just a couple of questions I saw.
Kurt Lindberg from Waitsfield. I too would like to add my appreciation and thanks for the amazing amount of work that's been done. It's incredibly thorough. Obviously, you've gotten very good advice, and I totally agree with you. The time to do this is now. Things don't line up like this very often, so I hope you get an overwhelming vote of support from the residents.
Thank you. You could help us gauge that by signing our support letter that's over there and filling out our survey that's over there. Both of them will take you like 30 seconds. So please do that on your way out if you haven't done so already.
Okay. Hi, Phil Huffman. I live, excuse me, frog in my throat, on Brook Road here in Waitsfield, not the Warren Brook Road, Waitsfield Brook Road. And I have a couple of questions about the language in the, a question about the bond vote language and then about the numbers. and then a comment, I guess. So on the bond vote language, I agree, it's a little scary the way it's in. It's good to hear that the select board's looking at a resolution to clarify that how that's going to be covered essentially, and that it's not going to be on the back of taxpayers. And I guess I'm curious about, so the dollar figure that's in there is the whole project cost of 15 million for a bond being issued to that effect, even though the ultimate amount that wouldn't be covered by grants and loans is, or really grants, I guess, is only 1.7. So is it required that it has to be the whole 15 million in the bond vote language?
Unfortunately, yes. We have, Annie in particular has spent a lot of time with our lawyers trying to work our way around that any which way we can, and that's a statutory requirement that we have to bond for the full project cost. Anything you would add?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, we are
Required to work with a bond counsel, who is our legal counsel in town also. So they really prepare those documents. We give them all the information that they need, and then they prepare that language accordingly. I do wonder, Misty, if you have anything that you know of or to add otherwise on why it includes the full project amount in the ballot language from the funding side of things. Yeah, not to put you on the spot.
So sorry, Misty Cincigali, USDA. We do require, as part of our funding, the full project amount. There's, it's just part of what we require because we want things. Oh yeah, certainly. For our program, our grant, our loan, it's a requirement. So it really, in all honesty, it's community buy-in. So it's showing that there is the community behind the project, whether or not it's on the users or on the tax base. And I will say that I worked many a project in my 10 years with rural development on the water and sewer side, and I have to give it to you all in this town. This has been an amazing turnout. This is an amazing turnout, I will say. I know everybody wants more, but this is an amazing turnout. And the information provided really is, you couldn't ask for a better group. They put a lot of time, effort. They worked really well with all of us funders to make sure that we are on the same page, that we are working together. And really, we base our underwriting on the fact that users will be paying for this, that there is nothing on the tax base. All of our underwriting is based upon that. At the end of the day, what is the user rate post-project? And we all are working together to make it affordable. When you think about our funding and the funding stack that is there, at the end of the day, we all want to see the users on this system have an affordable user rate. So we work hard with folks to make sure that happens, and that's where grant comes. Although our low interest loan really is 30 years at 2.75%, you're not fixed rate. You're not going to see anything better these days, and it could go down. So as somebody who's worked in financing a lot of different projects throughout Vermont and New Hampshire, I'll just say if the project is necessary and inevitable, which I think, given the past here, we know that this project is necessary and inevitable. It's here, it's now. You will never see, I will say this with certainty, you will never see a funding stack like you see on that page. Like, I've worked in this for 10 years, even the days, when there was other monies that the government had given for water, wastewater projects, it's not to the size that you see on this paper. So I do think that has to be thought about, really stressed that
those monies are here, they're now, and if you let them get away and down the road want to do this project, one, it's going to be more expensive, a lot more expensive. We know what construction costs. We know that it goes up exponentially every year, every construction season, and we know that at the end of the day, if you have to do the project, if you don't have the grant sources, it's just going to be on the backs of everyone in the community. So But again, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm always available to talk about how our funding works, how our underwriting works, how we look at it. So I'm here, it's our taxpayer dollars, right? So it's yours and mine. This is the government, USDA, rural development. It's all of our taxpayer dollars. So we are stewards of our taxpayer dollars, and we want to make sure they're spent the right way. So just when we do our underwriting and we have what people will say a lot of strings attached, it's all of our monies. So me personally, I'm glad there's strings attached because we want to see it spent the right way. So again, I'm here to answer any questions. You have a lovely town, lovely community. This is really a great opportunity. So thanks for having me.
We should probably just do a few more questions, and then we're coming up at our 8 o'clock hour.
Hi, Brian Fleischer again. Hopefully this is a quick one. You'll have easements for people that want to connect will have an easement, but they probably will have to cross somebody else's land. Is that right? And how are you going to deal with the easements? Is it going to be, public domain, or are you going to buy easements, or how's that going to work?
Yeah, in a few cases, the connection lines would cross, one property to get to another. In most cases, folks we've talked to today are willing to do that to help see this project through without asking for consideration. There are the storage tanks and pump stations I mentioned. There's 4 of those along the route from essentially from the Waite House over to Fiddler's Green. Those will require more substantial easements, not just a buried pipe run through your land. It's going to take up a chunk of space, and that's a bigger consideration where we may and have put in the budget a small amount of funds to assist securing those easements.
I just wanted to comment on something you had mentioned earlier about the cost of building affordable housing, and how Eric had mentioned that it's not affordable for working folk, and that you couldn't control construction costs. But actually, when we're all sitting here right now, we're lowering the construction costs of all of those homes by somewhere in the $50,000 to $60,000 per project cost by approving this. So I think that's very important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and providing certainty that you're removing risk from the development process, because literally today you're unlikely to get additional septic capacity in the villages at all, and you may spend a lot of money trying and never get there. So I agree, this takes a chunk of cost out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just part 2 of what I wanted to bring into the conversation before. I guess it's maybe an observation just about the numbers, the dollar numbers. If my math is right, it's something like 11.3% of the $15 million cost would be borne through the loan that will be paid back by the users over time, including and plus the operating and ongoing maintenance costs. Mm-hmm. So that's 89 out of every $100 of this project are going to be coming from outside of this community, which I think is a pretty good deal, and especially since 0 of that, it sounds like, is going to be coming off of taxpayers on a town-wide basis. And then I guess my sort of further comment is I want to echo the thanks that others have said to everyone who's been involved in this project and continues to carry it forward. There's been great leadership on this from the select board over time. It is a project that's been needed and envisioned for a long time. It's really terrific to see it happening now. The volunteers that are involved, also the staff or recent past staff and consultants, the planning district is playing a critical role as well. So, it's a great collaborative effort. Hats off to everyone. And also just for the clarity of the presentation, I think for a very complicated set of information, I think it's presented really, really well. And it probably is obvious I strongly support this project. I do feel like it's absolutely critical for the economic and community vitality of not just Waitsfield, but the entire Mad River Valley. And you know, our community and our economy and our quality of life, and the reason why so many of us live here is the environment that we have the great fortune to find here, and the quality of it. And this is really critical for dealing with either existing or soon to come environmental problems that will affect the health and vitality of the river that's such a central part of everything, but also just helping to drive the economy, provide more housing opportunities, ways for people to make a living and keep going here. So I strongly support this, and I hope everyone else in Waitsfield who has the opportunity to vote on it will in favor, and also that those from the surrounding communities can be offering their voices of support even though they can't cast a vote on it. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we should wrap it up, and I would just say to circle us all the way back to the beginning, tying to your kind words, Phil, in terms of the future viability of the community. I think that's one of the reasons you saw in that video at the beginning. You had Eric from the Chamber of Commerce. You had Ira from Friends of the Mad River. You had Sean Lawson, major employer here in town. You had Ed Reed, a property owner in town that lives and is now going to be able to vote on this thing, all in support of the project. I think people are starting to get the importance of this for the future of our community, and that's gratifying. If you guys agree, sign that petition or sign that support letter, fill out the survey. It takes 2 seconds, and really, really, really appreciate your guys' attendance tonight. Thank you very much.